This is the story of how the seventh largest corporation in America went from $65 billion in assets to bankruptcy in just 24 days, and how 25,000 people lost their jobs, 60,000 stockholders lost their investments, and an entire industry was reshaped forever. This is the definitive story of Enron. Back in 1985, Kenneth Lay merged two natural gas pipeline companies, Houston Natural Gas and Internorth, creating what would become Enron. At first, it was straightforward. Pipelines, natural gas, nothing exotic. But Congress deregulated natural gas sales in the early 1990s, and suddenly Enron lost its exclusive right to operate those pipelines. The company needed to reinvent itself, and that is when Jeffrey Skilling stepped into the picture. Skilling, who started as a consultant, pitched a radical idea. Instead of just moving gas through pipes, Enron would become a trader, an intermediary, a marketplace. The company started trading derivative contracts for energy, then expanded into electricity, coal, paper, steel, and eventually even weather derivatives. At its peak, Enron's online trading division executed trades worth $2.5 billion every single day. Fortune magazine crowned Enron the most innovative company in America 6 consecutive years. The irony of that title would soon become painfully clear, because the real innovation at Enron was happening in the accounting department. The architect of the fraud was Chief Financial Officer Andrew Fastow, and here's what he did. Fastow created a labyrinth of more than 3,000 special-purpose entities, basically shell companies that existed for one purpose, making Enron's balance sheet look clean. Under accounting rules at the time, a company could keep an entity off its books if an independent outside investor put up just 3% of the equity. 3%. That was the threshold, and Fastow exploited it ruthlessly. In many of these partnerships, the so-called independent investor was either an Enron employee or someone whose investment was secretly guaranteed by Enron itself. The arrangement was completely circular. The rules required independence, and Enron manufactured the appearance of independence while keeping all the risk. Through this structure, Enron hid more than $30 billion in debt. Fastow personally collected at least $30 million in management fees from partnerships he controlled, a direct conflict of interest that Enron's own board of directors simply waived. Then there was mark-to-market accounting. This method allowed Enron to book projected future earnings as current revenue, even when those profits had not materialized and might never materialize. Sign a 20-year energy contract? Book the entire projected value as profit today. The result was staggering. Enron's reported revenues were roughly 95% overstated. And while all of this was happening, Enron was also manipulating energy markets in California. During the 2000 to 2001 electricity crisis, Enron traders used strategies with names like Death Star, Get Shorty, and Fat Boy to withhold electricity and to drive up prices. On recorded audio tapes, Enron traders bragged about stealing money from Grandma Millie. California's wholesale electricity costs rose 277% in a single year, from $7.4 billion to $27.1 billion, while residents suffered rolling blackouts. The first cracks appeared on August 14, 2001, when Skilling abruptly resigned as chief executive officer after only 6 months in the role, citing personal reasons. In the months before his exit, he had sold at least 450,000 shares of Enron stock worth around $33 million. The very next day, a vice president named Sharon Watkins sent an anonymous letter to Kenneth Lay. One line said it all. "I am incredibly nervous that we will implode in a wave of accounting scandals." Watkins was uniquely positioned to see what was coming. She had been with Enron for 10 years and had previously worked at Arthur Andersen, Enron's own auditor. She met with Lay personally on August 22nd and handed him a 6-page letter detailing the problems. But instead of acting on her warnings, Enron's leadership tried to contain the situation. It didn't work. By October, the SEC launched an investigation. The stock price, which had peaked at $90.75 the previous year, began its free fall. On December 2, 2001, Enron filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It had taken 16 years to build a $65 billion company and just 24 days to destroy it. What followed was chaos. 25,000 employees lost their jobs. $2 billion in pension savings vanished. 2/3 of the 15,000 employees whose retirement plans depended on Enron stock watched those savings become worthless, and the stock that had traded above $90 fell to 26 cents. Senator Jim Bunning captured the outrage perfectly when he compared Enron to the Titanic. In the Titanic, the captain went down with the ship, and Enron looks to me like the captain first gave himself and his friends a bonus, then lowered himself and the top folks down the lifeboat, and then hollered up and said, "By the way, everything's going to be just fine." Arthur Andersen, one of the Big Five accounting firms, was supposed to be the safeguard. Instead, they were collecting $25 million in audit fees and $27 million in consulting fees from Enron in a single year. When the SEC investigation became public, Andersen employees destroyed an estimated 2 tons of documents and deleted nearly 30,000 emails. The firm was convicted of obstruction of justice in June 2002, putting 28,000 more people out of work. The Supreme Court later overturned the conviction on a technicality involving jury instructions, but by then, it didn't matter. Arthur Andersen was already gone. The FBI investigation became the most complex white-collar crime case in the Bureau's history. 45 agents and support staff conducted over 1,800 interviews, collected more than 3,000 boxes of evidence, and analyzed 4 terabytes of data. As one FBI official put it, "In mafia cases, you flip capos against bosses." Fastow, we believed, was an Enron capo, and they did flip Fastow. He pleaded guilty to 2 fraud counts and became the star prosecution witness. In total, 22 people were convicted. Kenneth Lay and Jeffrey Skilling were both found guilty on May 25, 2006. But Lay would never serve a day. On July 5, 2006, he died of a massive heart attack while vacationing near Aspen, Colorado. His convictions were vacated because he died before he could appeal. Skilling was sentenced to 24 years in prison and a $45 million fine. He was released in February 2019 after serving over 12 years, permanently barred from ever serving as an officer or director of a public company again. The lasting legacy of Enron is the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, signed into law on July 30, 2002. It passed 423-3 in the House and 99-0 in the Senate. President Bush called it the most far-reaching reform of American business practices since the time of Franklin Roosevelt. The law created the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, required chief executive officers and chief financial officers to personally certify their financial statements, imposed harsh penalties for destroying financial records, and prohibited accounting firms from doing consulting work for the same clients they audited. Today, Andrew Fastow travels the lecture circuit. He holds up his Federal Bureau of Prisons identification card in one hand and his Chief Financial Officer of the Year trophy in the other. His message to audiences is unsettling. At a convention of fraud examiners in 2013, he said, "In my opinion, the problem today is 10 times worse than when Enron had its implosion." Sharon Watkins is now a professor at the University of North Carolina, teaching leadership and ethics. The Enron scandal wasn't just a corporate failure. It was a systemic failure of every institution that was supposed to protect the public: the auditors, the board of directors, the banks, the regulators. It proved that when the incentives are big enough and the oversight is weak enough, even the most respected companies can become the biggest frauds. And the 25,000 workers who lost everything? They are the reason we should never stop paying attention.